I hadn't intended on doing a review of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Something about it just didn't seem really interesting to me before it aired, and I was just like, you know, I'll just kind of sit this one out, or maybe I'll just watch every now and then. But I have to say, they have pulled me in. I have watched. Now we are up to episode 5, so I'm going to start doing my reviews now and give you a little bit of background of what happened up until this point. But if you haven't been watching, I recommend that you tune in. It doesn't take a lot to pick up, but it's really interesting. Number one, because it's Salt Lake City and because of the whole Mormon influence and because of the fact that religion is such an integral part of most of their lives. But beyond that, they all have interesting things going on, you know. So one is struggling in a marriage, the other one has a father in rehab, another one is married to her step-grandfather, which we'll get into later. So there's some messy stuff. These women are layered, is what I'm basically trying to say, which lends to an interesting show. I watched one last night, and I saw one scene that just drew me in, and I was like, you know what? I got to talk about this. I have to talk about this. So here we go. So like I said, this is their first season. This is episode 5. We have, I'm gonna give you a real overview of all the ladies. So we have Jen, who seems to be like the queen bee. She is a Polynesian, or she's some kind of Pacific Island American woman who is married to a black man who is a Muslim. And I think she's like the glue for all these girls. They all know her because I think they all know each other through Jen. I think that's Jen. Then we have Whitney, who is the youngest of the group. Really cute girl. She grew up in the faith, but got excommunicated because she was cheating on her husband with her current husband, and they're now married and happily married. So essentially both she and her current husband were cheating on their respective partners, and everybody was in the faith, and they all got Whitney and her husband got excommunicated. So she's like one of those who grew up in the faith, you know, followed all the rules, and then did something bad and got kicked out, and now she's kind of living her best life. So she's interesting. We have Meredith and Lisa, who I'm still trying to figure out who is who. That's Meredith, that's Lisa. Meredith is married and unhappily married because her husband Seth lives in Chicago, or I think maybe now Ohio, and they're having some issues, and officially, I guess, announced it once the show started that they are officially separated. So they're kind of living apart, but they come around, they get together every now and then. I think that what they said is that they're dating each other to see if it will work, but we'll talk about more about that later. We have Lisa, who I don't know much about except that she and her husband own a tequila company. She seems to be happily married. She's got a couple of cute kids. We have Heather, who is a divorced woman. She has 3 children, and she was married to somebody, to a Mormon. It said she only got married because she wanted a family and because I guess that's what was expected of her, but she never really was into him or never really in love with him. And then at some point he decided he didn't want to be married to her anymore and left her. And so now she's a single woman raising 3 kids, and I guess just, oh, she's very successful. She owns some kind of like a beauty med spa business. So she's well-to-do, but doesn't have love in her life. Now we have Mary. And Mary is the reason why I'm doing these reviews, because Mary is a whole bag of crazy. And I just can't, she's the quintessential car accident that you cannot look away from. Like, you see it, you see everybody else rubbernecking, and you're like, well, it's just another accident, just kind of let it go. Why are you watching this? But then when you get up on it and you see it, you're like, I see why everybody slowed down. She's a hot mess. And I almost feel bad talking about her because I don't think she's well, but you know, she put herself out there, and it's just so much to talk about. So, and we're gonna get to her later. So I think I covered everybody. So you have Heather, you have Meredith and Lisa, and I'm always gonna say their names together because to me they look alike and they're almost the same person. Then you have Jen, Whitney, and then Mary. Okay, like I told you, this bunch right here, they're gonna give it. This franchise right here, I think is going to kind of be like the new Atlanta, to be real talk, because Atlanta the light is starting to dim over there. Unless they do a real shake up and they just, you know, replace everybody, I don't know how much longer Atlanta's gonna last. And it had a good run, 13 seasons. And this review is not about Atlanta, but I'm just saying that this Salt Lake City has the makings of being the next top dog franchise because it's really that good. All right, so let's talk about it. Mary, I don't even know how to start this conversation without going back. So Mary's a label whore, right? She's all into the labels. Every time she walks out the door, she's got label on top of label on top of label, and it doesn't always go well. You know, she's not the label whore that, say, like Marlo from Real Housewives of Atlanta is, or even Erica Jane from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Like, those chicks got the labels and they know how to work it. Jen looks like she just fell into on a runway and just got up and it's just stuff all over her. None of it goes together. It's just like, it's just the exterior of her hot mess, right? So she's throwing a Met Gala luncheon for the ladies because she has a lot of money to burn and she wants everything to be over the top and glamorous. So she throws this luncheon, they all get together. Mary and Jen have had issues in the past because of some comments that were made between the two of them. And it erupts at the table. And they are going back and forth with each other. Jen's aunt had both of her legs amputated. And after she left the hospital, she had went to see, or she was in the same space with Mary. And Mary said, it smells like hospital. And that highly offended Jen because her aunt, who was like a mother to her, had the amputation. Mary didn't see what was wrong about what she said. She just doesn't like the smell of hospitals. You know, that kind of escalated to all this ruckus between the two of them. And then last week, Jen went into this tantrum because the other girls are still being friendly with Mary. You know, it's just such childish, you know, high school nonsense, but that's kind of what the Real Housewives usually is. So she's mad at the friends for being friends with Mary, and it turned into this big thing. And she cussed at Mary, saying that Mary was a grandfather fucker. And let me explain that. So Mary is the granddaughter of a preacher. So it was a woman in Salt Lake City, a black woman in Salt Lake City who had a church and has this big, huge following. And when she died, she left the church and everything that came with it and all these riches and all this wealth to her granddaughter, Mary, but also left in her will that she wanted Mary to marry her second husband. So Mary essentially was asked to marry her step-grandfather. And she did. So now again, they're not blood because this is her step-grandfather, but that's all I gotta say. And the fact that she did it just kind of gives you enough information to know who we're dealing with here. But we will get to that at the end because that's the topic of conversation. And that's the one that moved me to even want to review this show. So they're arguing back and forth. Mary and Jen, they're going back and forth, and you know, Mary's talking over her. Jen is very emotional and breaking into tears and screaming, and she's over the top, dramatic, all of that. And implying that Mary might be racist, even though Mary's black, because Mary had told her at one point that when she drives up to a 7-Eleven and sees black people outside, she just keeps driving. Jen says she takes offense to this because she's a woman of color and because her husband is black. You know, Mary says to her, oh, you're being ghetto. And then Jen takes offense to that. And then Mary calls her a hoodlum, and Mary then kicks her out and she leaves, but then she comes back, and it's just going back and forth. The other women try to intervene and basically they're basically telling Mary to calm down. Like, it's really not that serious. And she's just shutting them down one by one. You know, Heather says something to her. She tells Heather she's two-faced. Whitney says something and she tells Whitney, oh, you're young. You don't know what you're talking about. So Mary's not trying to hear nobody. And this is because she's all in her head because she's crazy, right? One thing I have to say about the comments about ghetto and hoodlum, because those are trigger words for people, and there is a belief, I think, on the behalf of black people that when somebody who's not black, or shoot, anybody, says to them that they're being ghetto or acting like a hoodlum, that it's racial. because I think the words hoodlum and ghetto have become synonymous with Black folks. And we all know that that's not true. Ghetto, you know, ghetto is really, it's a neighborhood, or it's a living situation, and it has somehow become synonymous with the Black community. So that, for some reason, and sometimes people do mean it that way, and sometimes people just take it that way. And I don't know how Mary meant it. And people will say that, you know, Mary's a Black woman, so can she really be racist? But I think Mary thinks she's better than everybody. And the fact that she said if she sees Black people outside of a 7-Eleven, she keeps driving. She strikes me as one of those Black folks who wears her Black proudly when it suits her. You know, she's the kind who's quick to say, you know, I'm a strong Black successful woman. I'm a Black woman who owns a church. I'm a Black woman who has all this money, but then disassociates herself with what she considers other kind of Black people. And I think that's what Jen was implying, that, you know, you're saying something that's quasi-racist, and it is offensive, and it's offensive, period, but it gets more offensive for Jen because she's married to a Black man and she has Black children. So, but you can't take anything Jen says, you can't take anything Mary says seriously, because the woman is off. She's clearly off. You can tell she is in her mind, there's a whole other conversation that's going on behind the scenes. We're only hearing the pieces that are coming out of her mouth, but there's a lot more going on. And she just throws words out, you know, she want to talk over you, you know, she's off. And Jen is a little off too. So I guess that's kind of why the two of them just kept going back and forth, and the other ladies were sitting there like watching a tennis match, like what's really going on here with these two? So this is an ongoing beef between the two of them. And so this is how the episode started, the two of them going back and forth. Later, we see them both back talking to their respective husbands. So Jen is on the phone with her husband, Sharif, I think his name is. He's a football coach or something, and she's on FaceTime with him. And Mary is at her home talking to her husband. So now, Jen is all the way crazy too. She's dramatic and all these things. And her husband, I have to say, God bless him, because he really pretended like he was interested in what she had to say. You know, he gave her the energy that she needed. He gave her some advice and some pep talk and told how much he loves her and this and the other. But you know, this man was like, here we go with this nonsense. Like, this chick needs a hobby or a job or something, because she's acting like she's in high school. But that's kind of what they do. So then we see Mary talking to her husband. She tells him that Jen is picking on her, and that it's all the ladies against her, you know, all the hysterics and the dramatics, and, you know, and he's listening to it. Just side note, this is the second or maybe third time I've seen her husband, and every time I see him, he's in the kitchen in his pajamas. Like, does he leave the house? You know, he strikes me as, I'm thinking Mary's probably in her 40s. Looks like he's in his late 60s, early 70s. But the man looked like he don't get out of his pajamas. Like, he just stays in the house and kind of just mills around. But, you know, he's indulging her, because what else is he gonna do? You know, he knows that I'm sure he knows she's off. He probably feels like she's a prize in his eyes. He's happy to have her, so he just tells her what she wants to hear. We see a scene where Meredith picks up her husband Seth from the airport. So like I said, he's working right now in Ohio, and I guess he comes in every several weeks or whatever to come and see his family. So she's picking up from the airport, and he starts talking to her about relocating to Ohio. Like, let's be in the same state. And she tells us that they have relocated many times for his job. Now, he has a business and she has a business, and I'm assuming her business is the type where she can kind of move it around. And they've been making moves based on his career. So she says at one point they were in Canada, and then they moved to Chicago, and then they moved someplace else, and then they moved to Salt Lake City, and then he went back to Chicago, and now he's in Ohio. And she's like, you know, I'm tired of moving. Like, all of this relocating, like, A, I have a business, B, I have a family. Like, I'm not doing this. And their marriage is on the rocks. Like, I don't know why he thinks that at this point in time, she would pick up everything to go be with him. But he strikes me as somebody he seems annoying. You know, she told him, I don't want to talk about it. He just keeps pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. Well, why don't you want to be in Ohio? And, you know, let's be under the same roof. And like, dude, you just walked in the door. Like, she just picked you up. You guys are already having issues. Why are you pushing her on this right now? you know, and there was an episode a couple of weeks ago where he asked to see her phone and was trying to imply that, you know, she could see his phone whenever she wants to, but he can't see her phone. Like, he just seems like he's annoying. Like, he's one of those guys who just kind of needles and needles and needles and annoys the hell out of you. Because he was annoying me, and I don't know this man. And he was on the screen for all of 2 minutes, and I was like, God damn, like, this dude just won't let shit go. So, I'm understanding why Meredith feels the way she does. And the fact that they have moved around so much. So Meredith's son is a whole other character. His name is Brooks. And he's in college. He wants to be a fashion designer. I think he's homosexual. But he has a very weird attachment to his mother. He says he dropped out of school so that he could be there for her because she was going through a separation. And nice, that sounds nice, but I don't know too many 19, 20-year-old boys who would do that. And even the times when they're talking, he just seems like he's talking to her like he's her peer, not her son. And she seems to be deferential to him. Like, you know, what Brooks says, and Brooks says this, and Brooks says that. And it's a weird relationship that they have. And now I'm starting to connect the dots because maybe it's all this moving around that has made him this way. You know, it's hard for children when they don't get to settle in and have roots in a neighborhood and have childhood friends and things of that nature. So, and if he is gay, and I don't know when he came out or not, like, he might have had problems like fitting in, and maybe that's why he just clings to his mother so much, and why he just seems he seems like he's older than his years. Yeah, he's a little odd. He had one little scene in this episode, but yeah, Brooks is, I don't understand their relationship. But now I see that, you know, his father's a little off, and he's moving around a lot, so maybe that's what it is. There's something else I want to mention about Jen and Mary. I don't know how long they've known each other, but Jen seems to be upset because she feels that when she moved to Salt Lake City, or when her and Mary discovered each other in Salt Lake City, in a place where there aren't many Black people or many people of color, she thought there was going to be a bond between them because Mary's Black and she's a woman of color and married to a Black man. And she's disappointed, I suppose, that didn't happen. And that was an interesting moment for me because I've seen that several times, and I'm still learning, that just because, what they say, all skin folk ain't kin folk, there's so much truth to that. I've walked into many work environments or social environments and think because, oh, she and I are both Black women, she and I are around the same age, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna be really cool. I can trust her. And I've been disappointed, and I've learned the hard way that you can't make those assumptions. It would be nice if, you know, we could automatically click with people who we were similar to or who we thought we were similar to, but it's so much bigger than that. And funny enough, you know, having been in many spaces where I was one of the few Black people in a room, you know, going to like white schools my whole life, I've kind of found that sometimes when you're only one of a few, that can cause more of a rift between you and that person, because they don't want to be seen as somebody who's only sticking with their own, or who's being partial to somebody because they are of the same ilk. Or sometimes people want to be the only one, the only whatever that is. And I've seen this, folks who are quote unquote minorities in any space, sometimes they like the fact that they're the only gay person on the team, the only woman, the only Black person, the only Hispanic, the only Jew. Like, the list goes on and on. Some people find some kind of cachet in that. And when you walk into the room and you are, in a sense, a duplicate of them, they feel threatened. And I don't know why that is exactly. I'm sure some psychologists or sociologists could break that down, but that's what I've observed. So I've learned to just let things happen organically, or basically to not have any expectations. I will not assume that, you know, you and I are going to be friends, we're going to be, you know, buddies, I can trust you, any of that, because, you know, you may get disappointed. And I think that that's a lot of what Mary is going through. She's feeling like, hey, what Jen is feeling, you know, she thinks her and Mary, I guess we're going to be like these soul sisters kind of thing. And Mary wasn't here for that, because Mary's different. I'll just leave it at that. So we see another scene where Seth and Meredith are talking, and apparently he's been in town for a couple of days and he's packing up his stuff and saying it's time for him to leave. And it was a sad scene because he expresses to her that he doesn't like where they're at. He doesn't like the separation, and he feels like she wants him to leave and that, you know, she's kind of shooing him off. And she tells him that she thinks that they need space in order to get back together again. And he doesn't like it. He's emotional about it. You know, he's saying, we've been together for 25 years. This hurts me. And she feels his pain too, but she's pretty confident that she wants the space and she does want him to leave. And she lets him know that she wants to remain separated. And they hug and they cry, and you can see the pain in her eyes and watching him leave. And that was sad, and it was difficult to watch, because I've been there where you know this person is not right for you, or you know that your relationship is on its last legs, but you still love that person, especially if you've been together for a long time. And it hurts you to have to hurt them. And I think that that's what Meredith was feeling. I think Meredith is already out of this marriage. I think she's checked out, and the separation and the whole let's separate and see how this works is just you know, something to do in the meantime to get him adjusted to the idea that they're not going to be together. And it was, yeah, that was sad. So I don't see it for them. I think definitely by the time we get to the next season, those two will be divorced. But hey, it is what it is. So this is the scene that I really want to talk about. Mary meets up with Heather for lunch, and they talk about what happened at Mary's luncheon, about the argument between Jen and Mary. And Heather, you know, seems like a logical, level-headed woman. She's trying to understand, like, what is this all about? Like, why, what's the beef? Why are y'all arguing like this? And I know that she said some things about you and you said some things about her, but like, come on, like, we can't make this work. And Mary starts in on that fact that she believes Jen is jealous of her, and because she thinks that Jen doesn't like her because of her color. And so Heather's like, so you think she has a problem with you because you're black? And she's like, well, you know, because of my color, and because of my fashions, and because of my flair. And, you know, I was kind of the same way. Heather was looking at her like, what do you mean because of your flair? Like, what are you talking about? Is it a black thing? Or is it she's jealous of you because you have stuff, because you have money? Like, Jen also has money. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And Mary, her mind just kind of just jumps all over the place. Like, she starts here and then she's there and then she's here. And so trying to follow her and trying to make logic out of the words coming out of her mouth is futile, because it's never going to make sense. And she's got these crazy eyes and she's just all over the place. She's not really articulating herself well. And I think Heather should have just given up. Just sit there and eat and drink with her and let her ramble, because you're never going to get anything out of this woman that's going to make any kind of sense. Mary brings up the fact that Jen talked about her being married to her grandfather. And she had a vulnerable moment where she explains to Heather that her grandmother, who was her world, passed away and decided to leave her everything, and also leave her husband. And she asked that Mary marry her husband. And Mary said she didn't want to do it. She said it took 2 years because she didn't want to. I mean, why would she? It's the whole thing is just creepy, you know, for so many reasons. I mean, he's so much older than her. He was married to her grandmother. It's just, I don't even have to say anymore. It's just the whole concept of it. The fact that she's like leaving it in her will, and the fact that he's willing to go along with it too. Like, what the hell? And I think all of this is cloaked under the word of the Lord and the church, and, you know, that God, this is what God wants. And that's why Mary did it. And she even used the words. She said, my grandmother wanted this and I obeyed. That was interesting to me. You obeyed her. You know, it just sounds so archaic. and medieval. Like you just, almost as if you were just sold off like livestock. And then I have to wonder if Mary, you could have said no, but it sounds to me like you didn't say no because the church, it was contingent. All of this inheritance was contingent upon you marrying him. And she even says to Heather, well, look at me now. I've got all these labels and Louis Vuitton and this, that, and the other. And I'm happy. Not, oh, he's a wonderful man. Not, oh, he's everything I ever wanted. Or we are so compatible. You know, you make it sound like it was a barter. And for you to get the church and the money, that you were willing to do that. And if that's the case, I don't know if that's what made you crazy or if you were crazy before. Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because this could make somebody crazy. I can see there's a delusion going on with Mary where I don't know if she's, again, I'm not trying to diagnose this woman because I am no way, shape, or form a doctor, but there's a schizophrenic thing about her, like the way her eyes kind of move around, and it's like, she seems like she's telling herself stories to cope. And I think one of the stories is that she did the right thing and that this is what God wanted, and she had to, you know, she was honoring her grandmother. So she starts crying and she says, you know, I didn't want to do it, but I did. And I felt sorry for her at that one moment. I don't know how old she was. It sounds like she was probably in her 20s. Now, your 20s, you are grown, but I look at myself at 20s and I was impressionable. Not that I would have ever agreed to that, but I was impressionable. And then once you, and if she really was close to her grandmother in that way, and I think she mentioned at some point that her mother had a falling out. So if your grandmother is your source of love and comfort, and she asks you to do something, and it's also packaged in the whole church and God thing, then maybe that's why she did it. It just was, oh God. And even when she described the first time they had sex, she said after the wedding, she said they didn't have sex for 2 weeks because she told him she was on her period because she didn't want to do it. And he kept asking her, like, is your period over? That shit is so creepy. And to see this man, this older man, just waiting for her to say yes, and you were having sex with her grandmother. I don't know how long he's known her, but I imagine you probably knew her when she was a little girl, or at least young. The whole thing is just creepy. And maybe that's why she's crazy. And if she is, then I guess I got to give her a pass because that's a lot. That's a lot to unpack. But anyway, other things happened. We saw a couple other little scenes, but those are the three that really just moved me to do this video because I thought those were compelling storylines. They were interesting, a little funny. And yeah, this is a good show. I mean, Andy Cohen, you did the thing. I don't know how you found them, and I don't know who contacted you, or if you went to Salt Lake City for a weekend and you was like, oh, okay, let me try something over here. But you did the damn thing, and this is good stuff. So I am all the way in, and now that Potomac is wrapping up, this will be my weekly review. I don't know that I'm going to do Atlanta because the first episode left a little to be desired, but we'll see how I feel later. But yeah, Salt Lake City is good. So if you haven't started watching, get up on it and drop down in the comments and we'll talk about it. And I will talk to you guys next week.